Story 1. I was traveling, and on one leg of the trip what I thought was a 2-hour layover was actually a 26-hour wait. I did not have the right visa to leave the airport, and the customs official said I would not be able to stay overnight. I asked if I could buy a visa anywhere at the airport. He gave me a price, but it was in the local currency and I did not know the exchange rate. The automatic teller machine would only dispense United States dollars for an American card, so I took out 100 United States dollars and went back to the desk. I handed the money to the customs official and asked if it was enough. It was not until I saw him put the money in his pocket before stamping my passport that I realized I had just paid a bribe. Story 2. I helped myself to the candies in the bins at the grocery store that you had to scoop into a bag. I was 10 and thought they were candy samples. Story 3. I used to buy single cigarettes from a corner store all the time when I was in high school. Once I went to a different store and asked for 2 Newport cigarettes. The clerk set down 2 packs, and I put down 50 cents. We were both confused. It turned out that selling single cigarettes was prohibited. Story 4. I took what I assumed was a free mint chocolate from a bowl at the pay station at a Mexican restaurant. After we had left, my then boyfriend kindly pointed out that they were 25 cents each and laughed at how I had nonchalantly taken one. I asked him to turn around so I could pay, but he did not, saying not to worry about it. I went back the next day to give them their quarter, and the manager thought it was really funny, saying it happens all the time but no one had ever returned to the scene of the crime to admit guilt and offer retribution. Story 5. I passed my driving test on a Wednesday, bought a car the following Friday, and was commuting to work on the motorway by the next Monday. Fast forward several years. I needed my car logbook, I think to change my insurance company, but my memory is hazy. I searched every drawer in the house and, when that turned up nothing, went through old boxes of files and papers. Eventually I found an envelope addressed in my handwriting to the driver and vehicle licensing agency, so I opened it, confused. Inside I found my driving test pass certificate, the forms for applying for a full driving license, and a postal order to pay for the license. That should tell you how long ago it was. My first realization was that I had done all the required steps except post the envelope. My second was that I had been driving for years without a license, which meant my insurance was invalid and I was driving without insurance. Both of these are illegal in the United Kingdom. I phoned the driver and vehicle licensing agency straight away and explained what had happened. The person I spoke to said it was not an unusual occurrence and asked when I had actually passed my test. He winced when I told him and said that if it had been a couple of years they would have honored the test certificate and sent out my license. But since I had actually been driving like this for 13 years, luckily without an accident or incident, they could not do that, so I had to take my tests again, both theory and practical. And that is how I managed to perpetrate a 13-year-long crime spree and pass my driving test twice. Story 6. Almost every day in college I stopped at a gas station near my home to pick up a snack or drink. On my way out, I would grab a copy of the newspaper from the stand next to the door without paying for it. I thought newspapers were free. I was oblivious until my college boyfriend saw me and pointed out that I was stealing. Story 7. I bought some books to study Thailand before spending a summer there. I had not finished the biography of the king, so I brought it with me. A short time into the trip, some Thai students saw me reading it and were very interested. I found out that the biography was banned in the country and that I could face jail time if caught with it. The students wanted to borrow it so they could copy it and read what the government did not want them to see, which amused me. Story 8. I took a fake knife to school for a magic show. I planned to stab myself and say Tada with no blood. Unfortunately, I showed a friend early in the day, and he ran around at recess pretending to stab about 10 kids. I ended up in the office with the police and my mother. I was in 3rd grade. This was in 1997. I am sure it would have been a hit at the talent show had it not caused complete panic during recess. It was very realistic. Story 9. I started a small fire in some bushes behind an apartment when I was about 11, experimenting with copper and magnesium. It was a very small fire, much smaller than a typical campfire, but we were rightly busted when a fire truck came by. We had to attend fire school and a course on preventing arson. Story 10. I scanned a dollar bill and printed it during computer class in 7th grade. The substitute teacher called the police. An officer took me into a small room, threw a book at me, and made me read the entries about counterfeiting aloud. I was very scared, but girls liked me a lot more after I was pulled out of class. Story 11. I was in 8th grade. A girl in my class was bullying me and threatened to kill me in a very graphic and violent way. She said she would do it at graduation and then rape me with a knife for everyone to see. I had had enough of her behavior. It had been a whole year and no one had done anything, so I said, "Not if I kill you first," which technically was a death threat. A teacher overheard me and I was taken to the principal's office. The principal called the police, and I was screamed at by a grown man inches from my face, spit hitting my cheeks, for about 20 minutes. He finally threatened to take me to jail. I stood up and said, "Do it. Anywhere is better than here." That finally prompted a call to my father, who was a juvenile prosecutor. I still received in-school suspension while the bully and everyone else went on the school field trip, but I was not arrested. Story 12. I bought a sandwich outside the United States, waited until I returned home to eat it, and did not declare it. Story 13. I went trout fishing and kept about 5 undersized trout. The river where I was has multiple zones with different legal sizes for keeping fish. Some zones do not allow keeping trout of any size, and I thought I was in a zone that allowed it. I never got caught, but if I had, it probably would have resulted in a $300 to $500 ticket and the fish being confiscated. Story 14. I once built a 3-foot-long blowgun for target shooting. It was winter and I was bored. I got pretty good with it, so I thought I might use it to hunt. Not being a total idiot, I looked up the legalities and it turns out you cannot even own one here. So it is back to plumbing supplies. Story 15. I thought the postcards in the hotel lobby were free. When I showed my mom in the car, she said it was stealing and made me give them back. On my way back out of the hotel, I walked through the hotel's plate glass window. I have scars all over my body, including one between my eyes. Lesson learned. Doing the right thing will try to kill you. Story 16. I found a 6-point deer skull in the woods. I thought it was cool and took it home. It turns out I was legally required to call the game commission and pay $10 per point to keep it. Story 17. When I was a toddler, my mother pushed the cart close enough to a fire alarm that my curious hand reached it. Because she was embarrassed and disgusted, she spent the evening telling me how horrible jail would be and that my actions could land me there. Story 18. When I was 18, my grandmother died and I had to go to her funeral in France. We needed a member from the North American contingent to attend, and I volunteered. She had died in a small room in an ancient family home in the French countryside. Next to that room was a huge room full of old bottles of alcohol that no one wanted. I volunteered to check the bottles and found a bottle of very old absinthe, more than 100 years old. The seal was intact, so I decided to bring it home to North America. I later found out that absinthe would have been considered a controlled substance because of wormwood. I only declared 1 bottle of alcohol to customs. I still have it 18 years later, and it tastes disgusting. Story 19. I took a cool rock from a national park when I was a kid. I still have it and plan to return it someday. Also, in the mid-1990s, a demonstration computer at Circuit City had a simple computer game. I brought a floppy disk from home and copied the game to the disk so I could keep it for free. Story 20. I knew it was illegal at the time, but I had an unlimited rental pass at Blockbuster. I would walk in, rent a movie, go home, burn it and make copies, then come back and repeat throughout the day. I probably backed up Blockbuster's entire collection for them. Story 21. Riding a bicycle while intoxicated is apparently considered driving under the influence. I was on private property, though. Story 22. I did not know until recently that it was illegal in my state for anyone under 18 to play a pinball machine. Story 23. This happened to an old friend from church. Whenever he shopped for groceries, he would grab a pre-made sub-sandwich and eat it in the store. He believed he did not have to pay for it if he finished it while still shopping. He thought the store provided the sandwiches and included the cost in the grocery prices. Another friend told him that you must pay for them and that taking one without paying is theft. He had been doing this for months or years while shopping alone, unaware of the truth until that day. Story 24. When I was 12 and had just discovered what my penis was for besides urinating, I went on the internet to see what the fuss about pornography was. I was disappointed to find that all I could see were women much older than the girls I had a crush on at the time. Fortunately, the search did not turn up anything. Otherwise, we might have been visited by the police. Story 25. Apparently, it is illegal to transport marijuana across state lines, even if it is legal in both states. I used to borrow compact discs from the library, rip them to my computer, and put them on my iPod. I did not know that was technically illegal until I mentioned it to the librarian. He told me it was illegal. We laughed, and he sent me on my way with a bountiful harvest of free music. Librarians are really cool. Edited to add. Not me, but my very gay roommate accidentally picked up a prostitute once, thinking she just needed a lift somewhere. Story 26. Not me, but my friend would bring new umbrellas every now and then, as if he were making a collection. One day my roommate asked him why he bought so many umbrellas. He replied, "No, I get them from the bank. They are free." Story 27. One day I put Visine in the sauce of my leftovers because I was tired of my lunch being stolen. It turned out the thief was the doctor who owned the practice where I worked. He felt terrible and fell asleep at his desk between patients that day, and he never ate my lunch again. We never discussed it. My manager did not confront me, but a couple of coworkers knew what had happened. I looked it up afterward and was shocked at how dangerous it could have been and how lucky that he was not seriously injured. Ingesting Visine does not just cause vomiting like Ipecac syrup, as often portrayed in movies. It can cause serious heart problems and low blood pressure, among other issues. Ingesting Visine is potentially fatal. Do not poison your own food or others' food. It is not funny and it is not a joke. I wish I had not done it and would not do it again. I made a serious mistake as a teenager that could have followed me for the rest of my life had things gone even slightly differently. Story 28. Speeding in Virginia is much more seriously punished than I realized. You can be jailed for it. My teenage self would not have done well in jail. Story 29. I picked up a seagull that was calm and let me hold it, but that is illegal. Do not pick up seagulls. Leave them alone. Story 30. I paid $6 for $100 worth of fabric at a Walmart self-checkout. I was new to sewing and did not realize you must take fabric to a counter to be cut and pay by the yard. I picked up the entire bolt and put it in my cart. Story 31. So I possibly committed mail fraud. My mother wanted me to apply only to local colleges so I could not move away. I absolutely did not want to stay home and attend the local Christian community college or the party college. This was in 2007, so as far as I knew, there were no online colleges. I paid a friend to submit his applications to those colleges way early, even though he lacked the qualifications. I took his denial letters and edited them on my school computer to make it look as if my application had been denied. I copied the envelopes, wrote my name and address on them, and affixed postage. Then I paid another friend with a car to drive to the other colleges and drop the letters in the outgoing mail at those schools' on-campus post offices. I applied to the colleges I wanted to attend and was accepted with scholarships. The real and fake letters arrived on the same day. I did not realize it was mail fraud until my therapist recently pointed it out, saying, "You were so desperate to escape your mother you would risk going to jail." I replied, "Oh, that was illegal? Shit." For legal purposes, all likenesses to people, living or dead, are unintentional, and the events in the above story are fictional. Story 32. When I was in middle school, my dad gave me $20 a week to pay for most things. I was rarely hungry at lunch, so I saved the money. One day someone asked to borrow $1 to buy snacks and said they would pay me back with a quarter as interest the following week. I agreed, and it became a thing. Next thing I knew, more people were quietly borrowing money from me and paying me back, and it snowballed to the point where I even had teachers borrow from me occasionally. During this period, I told my buddies that one or two people who had borrowed from me were often avoiding me because they could not pay me back. Someone offered to collect the money for me if they could keep some of what they collected. Sounded like a good deal, so I agreed. I eventually stopped because I felt people were only using me for my money. I tried to reinvent myself when I started high school. Years later, I realized I had inadvertently been a loan shark. Story 33. Jaywalking. Local police often do not care, since some crosswalks are much more dangerous to use than simply crossing a random section of the road. Story 34. I ran 2 water hoses to give 3 manatees fresh water, not knowing it was illegal. The manatees drank for an hour and a half, so they were obviously very thirsty. Poor things. Come lock me up. Story 35. Sodomy in Florida in the 1990s. It turns out I was breaking the law while engaging in anal intercourse with her. Story 36. Don't judge for real. When I first started driving, I thought I could turn left on red, but it turns out you can only turn right. Story 37. I brought homemade Applejack to school for a couple of months during apple season. It never occurred to me that it was alcoholic. Story 38. By printing fake money, I bought lunches at school every day. Eventually, the police came to the school and asked if I was making my own money. I said yes. They asked how, and I said my mom's color printer. They rolled their eyes and told me that was very illegal. I was 11 or 12 years old. Story 39. Someone was throwing out an entire bedroom set, so my friends and I took it from their trash and reassembled it in the middle of a dark street. Story 40. I once described the contents of a baseball game without the express written consent of Major League Baseball. Story 41. I picked up a feather from a bald eagle at the zoo. It had fallen from the eagle and was on its perch by the fence. I was unaware that this was a crime. Story 42. When I was younger, I had the bright idea to avoid paying for alcohol on airplanes by bringing my own 1-ounce shooters in a zip-top freezer bag inside my carry-on. No one said anything when I passed through the Transportation Security Administration checkpoint, and no one noticed when I took them from my backpack while the flight attendant served me a cola. I was drunk when the flight attendant came by to collect our trash, so I handed her the shooters. I was not belligerent or disruptive. I just watched in-flight movies quietly while intoxicated. That was probably the only reason the flight attendant issued me a warning instead of arranging for law enforcement to meet me at the end of the flight for drinking my own alcohol. That day, I learned that Federal Aviation Administration regulations prohibit alcohol consumption on a flight unless it is served by a flight attendant. Story 43. When I was a little kid, it absolutely crushed me to learn that punching people is illegal. I thought I'd just be able to punch my way through life somehow. Story 44. Attempting to swim the Columbia River turned out to be prohibited. You are not allowed to cross major shipping lanes by swimming. Story 45. When I was a kid, I brought my new camera on vacation. We were at a fancy casino hotel, and I was taking lots of pictures of the art and lights. An older man approached me and said, "You cannot film or take pictures in here. That is illegal." I said, "What?" and walked away. Story 46. A friend of mine downloaded thousands of songs from LimeWire in the early 2000s. His parents were hit with large fines that almost ruined them financially. Recently, his mother appeared on a daytime court television show to pursue the matter. They are a close family, so it was not malicious. It was a way to get her the money she was owed. It worked. The show reimbursed her. Story 47. My friend and I traveled to a place where marijuana was legalized. Before a concert, we smoked a joint on the sidewalk and wondered why everyone was giving us dirty looks. A couple of weeks later, we realized it is legal to smoke at home but not in public. Story 48. In my area, there are no specific laws against nunchaku, but it is illegal to carry anything that can be classified as a billy club. I only discovered that recently. I had occasionally carried nunchaku in public for years, usually when I biked or walked somewhere. I had even been pulled over and fined for not signaling while riding a bicycle with the nunchaku in my pocket, which prompted me to go home and triple-check the legality of carrying 2 sticks connected by a cord. Before that, I was 99% confident it was safe and legal, but while talking to the police officer with the nunchaku hidden in my gym shorts, my confidence dropped to about 50%. Story 49. I copied some vinyl to a cassette. My home taping contributed to killing music. Story 50. Wrote on money. Disposed of records without redacting names or shredding them. Story 51. My older brother and sister would take me to the mall to exchange my old shoes for new ones. Story 52. I went to McDonald's and asked for a cup of water but was given Sprite. Story 53. In first grade, I said I would blow up the school and that I knew how to make a bomb. I learned very quickly that the police do not take that lightly. Story 54. Driving with an open container. I always thought that as long as you were of age, it was legal. Why else would Dad always have a beer in the car? Story 55. As a child, I accidentally took a hat from Walmart. When my mother realized, she made me return it. I did, and they gave me a cash refund. Story 56. I got arrested for stealing a paper cup full of water. Obviously, Americans know that most places provide free water. I walked into a 7-Eleven convenience store and grabbed a cup of water. I was in disbelief and remained civil the whole time. I ended up in handcuffs. Man, that was actual trauma. Laughing out loud. It will always anger me. Story 57. On a road trip from the United States to Canada in the late 1990s, I brought snacks for the return trip. One of the snacks was a chocolate called Kinder Eggs. Oops. Story 58. I abandoned my car 50 meters off the side of the road in Alaska after it threw a piston. I scratched off the vehicle identification number so it could not be traced back to me. I did not realize it was 2 felonies. Story 59. I did not think anything about buying ivory until I noticed news reports about people being arrested for it. I have switched to Irish Spring because it is made for men. Story 60. I figured out that if I pulled the tickets at Chuck E. Cheese, they would duplicate endlessly. I later learned it was illegal when the police were called and my 7-year-old self was told it was stealing. Needless to say, it frightened me so much that I never did anything similar again. Story 61. I once knocked over a saguaro cactus in the desert with my car. I thought it would be wet and squishy, but it was like hitting a tree. Story 62. My parents were strict about dating in high school. I bought my girlfriend a birthday present but had no way to give it to her. I could either walk through town and past my mother's workplace, or walk on the highway and go around one exit. Turned out that was illegal in New York. Story 63. It was not really my fault, but when I was a child my grandmother would make her coffee with Bailey's and bring it with us when she drove me to school every day. Her truck had no cup holders and the coffee was in an open mug, so I had to hold it. It was not until my late 20s that I looked back and thought, wait a second. Story 64. Homemade ballistic missile. I immediately stopped working on it and disassembled it when I realized what it was classified as. College was wild, but not like most would normally describe. Story 65. I did not know it was illegal at the time. I learned later. I had a friend who was always on the move, and he once asked if he could store a case at my place. Based on the size, shape, and his hobbies, I assumed it was an electric guitar and shoved it under a bed. It was not. It was an illegally modified automatic rifle. I did not find out until he came to pick it up. I asked if he could play it, and he laughed and opened the case. The really illegal part was that I had large quantities of marijuana in my house, and that friend knew. If my house had been searched, I probably would still be in prison. Story 66. I trafficked enough lysergic acid diethylamide to face life imprisonment. I had only taken lysergic acid diethylamide a couple of times and enjoyed it, but I do not have the time to dedicate 12 to 14 hours to it anymore. I was hanging out with a friend, enjoying a smoke, when he asked if I would deliver a book to someone who lived nearby. He told me what the book contained, and I made sure to drive carefully and not do anything stupid. I dropped the book off and went about my day. A couple of weeks later, I watched a documentary in which a man talked about buying and selling lysergic acid diethylamide to Grateful Dead fans and Phish fans at festivals, and that he regularly carried a book of stamps. He explained that carrying that amount of lysergic acid diethylamide carries very severe charges, including attempt to overthrow the government in some states. I had no clue. In my state, it was enough to result in life imprisonment. I will never be that stupid again. Story 67. I shot guns in my basement with my dad when I was a kid. I only used a BB pellet gun, but he would put an empty shotgun shell with a primer at the other end and I would try to shoot it. Everything was fine until we tried a .22 caliber rifle. That shot went over to the neighbor's house. Story 68. I was of legal drinking age, but my driver's license prohibited any alcohol in my system. At a friend's house, I grabbed a mostly empty bottle of gin to take home and try later, since I had never tried gin. I left it on the passenger seat. When I got home, my mother asked if I had driven home with an open container. I asked if that was bad. I was trying to be responsible and could have ended up in jail. Story 69. Not me, but the time my friend, who was 7, and his dad were exploring the sewers in Oklahoma City and found a door that led into a bank. He had no idea what was happening and was just having fun walking around with his dad. Suddenly his dad opened a door, they went in, and an alarm went off. They ran even though there were probably no police nearby. It was doubly illegal because his dad had marijuana on him, which was illegal then. A few years later, as a teenager, he learned where they had actually ended up and found the story funnier than anything since it did not top his family's other stories. Story 70. I received a ticket for drinking a beer on a public beach. I was of legal drinking age and had no idea that was prohibited. Story 71. I used to ride a bicycle while intoxicated in Japan all the time. Where I am from, it is totally legal. I only found out years later that it is illegal in Japan. I do not drink anymore, but those bicycle rides are some of my fondest memories from there. Story 72. I had no idea I had been driving with a suspended license for 3 years. When a police officer finally pulled me over, he allowed me to pay the fines and move on with my life. Story 73. Soon after I got my first car, I drove to my friend's birthday party at a bowling alley. I was under the legal drinking age, but the bartender did not check and I had some beer. I was not a heavy drinker, so I drank maybe half a pint. I had brought some cupcakes and offered one to the bartender, who accepted. I then called some friends to come drive my car and me home since I had been drinking. When my friends arrived, I asked the bartender for a plastic cup. He looked a bit confused but gave it to me. I poured my remaining beer into the cup and walked out to my car, where it sat in the cup holder as my friends drove me home. I did not find out until a year or two later that I had broken multiple rules that night. I am wiser now. I do not know if this one counts, but when I traveled to the United Kingdom, I learned about conkers, which are horse chestnut seeds, and the child in me wanted to collect some and bring them home. At Canadian Customs, I declared a chicken pastry I had been given on the plane as meat, which required me to join a separate queue. I had an awkward exchange where the officer said that was not meat and I said it had chicken. It ended with me asking them to dispose of the pastry. A week later, I realized I had not declared the seeds I had brought back with me. Honestly, why am I like this? Story 74. I knew it was illegal, but I did not realize I had done it. I had forgotten a bag of marijuana in a suitcase and flew between 2 major cities 3 times before noticing. Story 75. Where I come from, there is a frozen yogurt place called Tutti Frutti. Every time I get their frozen yogurt, I load it up with toppings, have it weighed, and then pay. As I walk away from the counter, I see different bottles of flavored drizzle at the far end of the toppings and cashier area. I always thought, hey, cool, free Hershey's chocolate drizzle. So I would pour it over my frozen yogurt as the final topping and walk away. My boyfriend saw it and said, "You were supposed to pay for that too." I was so shocked because I had been doing that for years. Nobody ever said anything, not even the cashier. Story 76. I crossed a street in New York. Although it was a big street, there was no traffic. I had never heard of jaywalking. A friendly police officer explained it to me. Story 77. Turning on the car's interior light at night while driving, at least according to my dad. Story 78. I picked up a woodpecker feather from the ground and took it home. It is a violation of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Story 79. I found out my friends and I used to trespass nearly daily on government property. There was a no trespassing sign on the main road, but we came in from the back through a bunch of trees. There were no fences. It was a huge, mostly empty lot, and I assume they did not care because we once found cameras on the only building and nobody told us to leave. None of us knew. Years later, when I got my driver's license and drove past the sign, I was the first to find out. Story 80. This did not happen to me, but to my toddler daughter about 10 years ago. We lived within walking distance of Target, and sometimes I would walk there with her in the stroller. I remember we checked out and got home. Then I found a pack of AAA batteries in her stroller. I think she grabbed them while we were in line and I did not notice. That little thief. Story 81. When I was in college, living at home and commuting, I worked at a local credit union that was large for the area. The workplace had many older women, and as a young man I was frequently sexually harassed and propositioned. Many of them smoked, some with voices like Marge Simpson's sisters. After a trip, I realized cigarettes were much cheaper in Delaware. I would buy $2,000 worth of cigarettes at a time and made a profit of about 20 to 25% after I sold that inventory. That tax-free income of $400 to $500 a month was helpful. I sold them to the regular smokers who typically went through a carton a day. After about a month, I realized I had underestimated the seriousness of tax evasion and the risk of federal charges for crossing state lines, but I continued anyway for another year. Story 82. How I accidentally became a pimp. I was a sophomore in college. The university I attended decided it needed to raise tuition. A classmate, Brenda, came up with a plan to raise money and stay in school. She would date men and charge them. She asked for my help to make sure the dates went well and that the men paid her, and she said she would give me a percentage. We started making a lot of money, and soon some of Brenda's friends wanted to join. Pretty soon there were about 14 women I was protecting while they paid me. We decided not to use my real name and chose the nickname Gator. One day I woke up, looked in the mirror, and did not like what I saw. I had gotten out of control without even realizing it. One night, two of my favorite women, Candy and Jolene, said they had to take me in and they dropped me off at the emergency room. Story 83. Feeding birds in winter. I hand feed them rather than leaving food out. I have made several corvid friends. My tenancy agreement apparently forbids feeding birds because of pest problems. I am not sure whether they mean rats or the birds. Story 84. I did a lot of cooking and serving for Food Not Bombs when I was in high school and college. Story 85. I took my bicycle to the bar to get drunk so I would not have to drive afterward. I was stopped and a police officer asked if I had been drinking. I said I had been drinking a lot and had brought my bicycle so I would not have to worry about a ride. It turns out you can be charged with driving under the influence while on a bicycle. The officer laughed, explained that it still counts as driving under the influence, and told me he could see I had tried to be responsible. He told me to walk my bicycle home and not to do that again. Story 86. Carrying a snub-nosed .22 caliber in an ankle holster. I had a license to carry a concealed weapon. I figured it was all good until I was pulled over because my taillights were out. I told the officer I was armed and where all three weapons were and where my license was. It turned out the ankle holster was illegal. The knife strapped to my left thigh was a gray area because it was about an inch too long to be considered a knife under the law. The officer was cool about it and told me to leave the ankle holster at home. He then asked for the name and number of the person who made my shoulder holster because you could hardly see it under my jacket. Story 87. Oh boy. I have been learning programming. My first serious project was an app that would visit various popular residential sales and rental websites and perform web scraping to collect their data. My app could even show price history. If the price of a house dropped by $500, I would know. I wanted to sell it and make my first honest dollar. When the app was ready, I discovered that web scraping was illegal. I was frustrated. A few months of work were gone, so I archived the project and moved on. I started building a new app. This one used artificial intelligence to detect objects in a live screen recording, simulate mouse and keyboard input, and learn how to autonomously complete different tasks in games based on what it saw on the screen. If it detected a resource that could be gathered, it could identify its location, approach it, and click to collect it. I made it able to fish in Albion Online by default, but it could also learn how to play Valorant or other games. It was relatively undetectable without serious anti-cheat software because it only used what a normal person uses. Sight, and it did not read game files. It recorded the screen and determined where objects were. I have a post about it on my account somewhere. After a lot of work, it was ready. Then I found out that creating bots is illegal and Albion Online had a major botting problem. So I archived that project and kept it private. I did not choose the criminal life. The criminal life chose me. This time I am making a game. If this ends up illegal too, I will quit programming. Story 88. I squashed a terrifying giant insect that hissed at me in my kitchen. Turned out to be endangered in my area, and I still feel bad. I will never sweat a bug again. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.